This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So anybody online want to type in the chat box anything you were able to do last week to increase your resilience? Sanette, do you have an example?
Yeah. Same example. So last week I went through um, another class I was going through, and opposed to me not what did I do to increase my resilience?
Do you need real-time talk? So like that's not true. Did you ever, find yourself saying that's not true because?
Yes. So what I did was I found myself doing a lot of affirmations last week. I did, like, when I found myself getting discouraged in certain situations, I would hit back with how I did something different in the past, and I was successful in those things.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Sanette's saying that when she found herself getting discouraged, that she was able to hit back with statements of saying that's not true because of other things that she's done in the past. So I hope that you all were also able to find ways to do that because that's an awesome way to increase your resilience. And so today we're going to talk about optimism. And optimism comes from traditional psychology. And there's a basic premise that there's a relationship between your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And you can change people's life experience by shifting their beliefs. So remember last week when we talked, we pulled apart the A, the B's, and the C's. If you can change those B's, you can change the way people feel. So beliefs are related to optimism. They're the lens through which we see the world. We develop mental schemas and models and scripts that we blindly adhere to, even though a lot of times they're not true. So to feel differently, we have to start thinking differently. And here's an example of a belief: I'm a bad salesperson. The behavior is you give up trying to improve, and the result is a lack of sales. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then you can also have a belief that selling is a skill set, having more of that growth mindset. I can get better. It's not a fixed trait. Then the behavior is you practice and you learn new skills. You're open to that. And the result is that you have more sales with time and practice. An important thing to know is that optimism and pessimism are not character traits. So a person is not an optimist or a pessimist, but they do have an optimistic thinking style or a pessimistic thinking style. And we tend to have these for different areas. So, kind of very similar to growth and fixed mindset. I have a fixed mindset towards technology, right? So I have a pessimistic thinking style towards technology. And to remember that when we get into he's such a pessimist, we're in judger mode. The other thing is optimism and positive thinking are not sticking our head in the sand. We want optimism wedded to reality. And the benefits of optimism are experiencing less distress than pessimists, less likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. Optimists are better able to adapt to negative events. Optimism predicts psychological and physical well-being among university students, which is really important for you all. Optimists report more health-promoting behaviors and enjoy better physical health than pessimists. And optimists are at lower risk for heart disease. They also tend to exert more continuous effort and not give up, and learn lessons from negative experiences because they don't see it as catastrophic. And they tend to be more productive in the workplace. So here's an example of several different industries where sales people are really impacted by having an optimistic mindset or a pessimistic mindset. And in all of these situations, the optimistic salesperson outsells, stays longer, where the pessimistic person, a person with a pessimistic mindset, tends to quit, sells less. So very, very important for a sales position. And one of the reasons why is that sales is prone to a lot of rejection, and this optimism offsets the rejection. However, there are some fields where being a pessimist may do significantly better work. So law and safety. Another one that I mentioned earlier in the week was being a dentist. So things that where you really need to see the errors in order to be successful. However, I also noted that law and dentistry have some of the highest suicide rates as a profession. So maybe successful for work, but maybe not overall successful for life. So remembering that optimism is good for our well-being. So why is pessimism challenging? It promotes depression. It produces inertia. So when we're feeling pessimistic, we're less likely to do activity to help us get out of the pessimistic feelings. It makes us feel bad. Subjectively, we feel blue, down, worried, and anxious. And I shared that similar to the professions we just talked about, when I have to grade, it makes me feel bad. I don't like it because I have to point out what's wrong. And so one of the things I noticed is that I really disliked grading, and I really, am resistant to start it up. But changing my mindset to be more optimistic and to be more growth mindset is really where it came from, was to think about giving feedback in a way that indicates you're not there yet. So rather than right and wrong, you're not there yet. And another thing that was also helpful was for me to think about giving equal amounts of optimistic or positive feedback. So instead of just going through and writing what's wrong, also looking for the things that were right. So that's something that helped me with an activity that felt that way. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Pessimism is because it doesn't persist then you don't persist in the face of challenges. And here's the worst part. Even when a pessimist is right and things turn out badly, they still feel worse than an optimist where things don't turn out right, because their explanatory style turns a setback into a disaster. So it feels even worse, right? And I've had this experience where people try to get me to think in a negative way, and I'll say, that just doesn't feel good to me. And even if that's going to happen, I prefer to enjoy life up until that point happens, rather than spend all my time worrying about it. Okay, so for the practice, I want you guys online to type in some of the beliefs that came up for you that you discovered from your partner from last week in reflection. So when we talked about the A's, the B's, and the C's, what were some of the beliefs that came up? And for those of you that weren't here last week, we talked about an activating event. A lot of it had to do around schoolwork, where you're feeling really challenged or you experience some adversity, and to really dig and find out what's your belief underneath that. And a lot of the beliefs that came up, just for example, were that they weren't going to pass a class, or they couldn't handle the assignment, or maybe they didn't belong in graduate school. So kind of looking at those beliefs, further look at some of your pessimistic thoughts around that. Yeah. So we just been discussing online like some of the pessimistic thoughts are I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, so some of these that come up. And then, like let's look at the reality of you got in graduate school, right? So right, yeah, you're good, you're smart, right? So anyway, so just sort of again, it's really helpful to put these out on paper and just see I have this thought that realistically and objectively is not a true thought. Okay. So the steps to cultivating optimistic thinking are understanding and identifying mind chatter, which we worked on with mindfulness, understanding explanatory style, which we're going to work with today, practicing the ABC model, which we did last week, and then we did real-time resilience last week too, talking back to those negative thoughts. Okay, so again, this mind chatter, is an internal radio station, self-talk. A lot of times it's negative, it's automatic negative thoughts. So understanding that this is going on, and we're going to work with breaking this down a little bit more. Okay, so it can be broken down into factual thought, fantasy, future, and judgment thoughts. And I gave this example last week, but a factual thought is I'm hungry. A fantasy is what's for dinner? I wonder if Pete will be home soon. And a future thought is what if he's home late and I wait for him to eat, then I'll eat late at night and that's not good for me. I'll gain a lot of weight and I won't be able to work it off, right? Then the judgment thought, Pete doesn't care how late we eat. He doesn't have to worry about his weight, and it can even go so far as Pete's insensitive jerk or whatever. But you can see how our mind chatter goes from I'm hungry to there's a problem with a Pete, right? And there's no relationship. Remember, these are neural impulses that are practiced, right? And so if we use them a lot, then we easily go to them. But you can see the link, but there's not a real relationship. Right. Yeah. So TJ's saying, wow, it happens so quickly. It does, right? And I'll tell you, I am the first person that's like from a fact to a judgment so quick, right? Okay. So the facts and the fantasy are just a lack of mindfulness, right? Although I think I'm hungry is definitely mindfulness. Like if you're feeling that's mindfulness. But again, wanting to be in the here and now. And then future thoughts can lead to anxiety because you're worrying about what's going to happen in the future, right? And then the judgment thoughts can lead to depression because it doesn't feel good to negatively evaluate people, and especially somewhere in your mind, you know, there's no basis for it. So future thoughts lead to what next thoughts and our beliefs, and judgment thoughts lead to why thoughts. And that's just a little bit breaking down if we were to go more in depth with that. And this future thought that leads to anxiety can lead to catastrophic worst case scenario thinking and crisis mongering. And I have, you know, Chicken Little here in the sky fell. And the judgment thought can put people into learned helplessness and back into the judger pit, right? So one way to cultivate your optimism is this explanatory style, and it's a habitual way of explaining good and bad events that happen in your life. And so how you explain why something happened, right? So if I get a good grade on a test, if I say, oh, it's all the hard work that I did, then that's an optimistic style. If I say, oh, I must have really lucked out, or they must have not graded hard on that one, that would be a pessimistic style. And the 3 P's of explanatory style are personalization, permanence, you know, how it relates to me. Permanence, is it always or never? And pervasiveness, like, does this happen in every area of my life or just one specific area? You know, so if you have a failure, if you're like, oh, I'm such a failure, rather, I failed this test, right? And here's why, and here's some things I can do to change that. Okay, so the personalization is me versus not me. The permanence is always versus not always, and the pervasiveness is everything versus not everything. And an optimistic explanation for failure or setback would be, it's not me, it's not me, meaning my ability. Other factors were involved. It doesn't always happen. It's not going to last forever. And it's specific. It's this one thing, you know. So I failed this one test, and I know that I didn't put in the effort that I should have, right? And an optimistic explanation for success is, it's me. The success was due to my hard work and effort, and I can always succeed. And this success is going to spill over into other areas of my life. Okay, so now take a look at some of the pessimistic thoughts that came up, and how can you change them to be internal, permanent, and pervasive for success, and external, temporary, and specific for failure and setback. So you guys can go back to sharing as partners, and online we'll go back to the chat box. Okay, so are you guys willing to share any way you were able to think about how to change your thought to be more optimistic?
I think we're looking more at how to take these things that you've done previously and make them into either primers or reminders of the fact that you can do it. So specifically that sense of that you can't do things well enough was one for me. And so to change that is obviously like being in school here for a year, let alone anywhere else. And so to bring out like the grades that you've got and then how you did it, kind of, so maybe if it was an A and then the title of the class and then like mind maps and then put that up so you can remember that that's what you did, and you do that for every class. You're going to have a wall full of achievements for you to remind yourself of, you know, actually there it is, and you're constant reminders. So.
That's amazing. Okay, so Anita's sharing that you know, if you put up on your wall, I got an A in this class and this is why, that she was saying you need a primer to remind you, to kind of keep you in that optimistic mindset, is that primer of you being able to do it in the past, right? So I see like you're combining some of the self-efficacy too. And I think I did something similar one time with some course evaluations, right? And like I read them and I was like, oh wow, that's like so nice. And I pinned it up on my wall to remind me that even when you get the student who thinks like this is terrible and no good, that you know, it made a difference here for some people, right? Because it changes based on cohort and year and mood and all that. So I think, yeah, another way to like really remind ourselves of that. That's a great example. I love that. I didn't realize like I'd done a primer. I'm like, I'm bad at primers, right? Just show me.
Not true.
Okay, so Tori says she's used the ABC model. Okay, and she's constantly checking her pessimistic thoughts. And she's looking for more positive perspectives. So pulling out those B's, right? Like I think identifying the beliefs, and if you can really target that, that'll help. Okay, so inadvertent messages we want to avoid. That optimism is good and pessimism is bad, or there's one right way, or everyone should think this way, or it's all or nothing construct and it's not a personality trait. But what we want to understand is that this explanatory style it's a style. We can get stuck, right? It can limit our perspective. And I think what's really important is it's learned and it can be changed, and it can be a tool, and it helps us be flexible in our thinking. And I think it's also really useful when you're working with a client, when you see the pessimistic thought or you're picking up on the belief, being able to address it, right? So being able to use some of these, the 3 Ps to counteract the pessimistic explanation. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to ask you to do for today is we're going to do the best possible self exercise. And so for those of you online, you just need to get something to write with or to type. And now the full, you can look this up on the internet, the full way to do this is I think you're supposed to do it for 4 days for 20 minutes. So you're just supposed to write 20 minutes, you know, unencumbered, and write, what does your best possible future self look like? And I found this to be the most engaging, dynamic exercise that I did. I had no idea sort of what the meaning of my life was and how good things could look. And so to generate some optimism for you, I'm going to ask, let me see what, I'm going to ask you for the next 10 minutes just to write as much as you can.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I'm going to pull us back in. And let me just ask, what was that experience like writing about your best possible future self?
It was empowering and fun. It felt like a fantasy world.
Okay, so Sunat says it's empowering, it was fun, it felt like a fantasy world.
I think I wrote stuff I didn't know that I would like.
Yes, okay, so Anita says she wrote stuff she didn't know she would like. Right. For me, I was like, oh, that's my passion because I thought it was over here. So it was really interesting for like what's important. Okay, let me see. Okay, and freeing, happier just doing it, relaxing, scary. TJ says scary, but then excited as she continued. Yeah, I mean, and I was telling Sonette, I did this 6 months ago, and I want to do it again because I feel like a lot has changed. Like that opened up so many things that I didn't think were possible. And now, you know, based on that, I feel like I could do it again. But apparently you're supposed to do this again, 20 minutes a day for 4 days. It's supposed to really unlock something special. So Miriam says peaceful and happy, excited is moving forward and writing more. I didn't want to stop. I couldn't believe how much I could keep going. So that is all I have for you today. Next week is our last week, and it's all going to be partner activity. And I'll send an email about this to remind everyone. But bring your workbook, bring your best future possible self. So we're going to do some coaching, some different activities. And there's a question: does the writing more increase the likelihood of doing these things? I would say yes. I mean, I think anything that you can visualize in your mind, you start to move toward. So for you guys online, I'm going to pair you up. For those of you that came in a little bit later, I'm going to pair you up so that you can either chat, or maybe if you want to arrange to talk on the phone, because we're going to be going through some different activities, and I think it's important to work with a pair. So I'm going to try to pair you up. And I think the discussion boards would be too slow. So you can do private chats to each other, or you can arrange to do a phone call. So I will get that to you before next Thursday. And if you're, so if you confirm you're going to come, you've got to come and pair with your partner, or else, somebody might be left out. So please let me know if you're not going to be able to come. And I'll send an email and to confirm all this. But anyway, that is it for Optimism. We're wrapping up Psychological Capital, or PsyCap. And next week, we're going to put it all together. All right, thank you, guys. Hi, Paloma. Thank you.